being Tuesday night, we have a Q&A session. So we have a few questions to answer tonight that hopefully will bring greater clarification or encouragement in your practice. We'll see. So, first question. How do we deal with lust coming up in our meditation? You might say this is getting down to the heart of the matter. When I lived in Thailand and we'd visit different teachers, one of the ways teachers who are like meditation teachers, they would greet you as a monk. They say, "Have you seen your bones yet?" It's a typical meditation monk greeting. It's kind of symbolic whether you've developed a super meditation, meaning the meditation on the unattractiveness of the body or not, and also whether you got anywhere with it, because we need to learn to see the true nature of the body to counter the natural attachment to the perception of beauty. We're always looking for the beautiful in the body and in the world around us, the sensual world. And we look for that which is attractive through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, taste, touch, and our mind itself, fantasies and imagination. So, to counter the most, one of the most deepest ingrained attachments we have, lust, desire for the body, identification with the body, seeking pleasure and beauty in the body, our body and the bodies of others. We need to balance that out, balance the perception out by developing the perception of the unattractive, what we call a super sanya. Super is beauty, asupa, unbeauty, the unbeautiful. So it's very much at the heart of our practice in the monastery. But really anyone meditating, lay people as well, you have to develop it, because you'll find the hindrance of what we call kama chanda, sensual desire, in so many ways, so many forms, will come up all the time, and it will block the mind from seeing the Dhamma, from being mindful, from developing samadhi, and from developing insight into the truth. So sometimes we call it the fourth characteristic. Everyone's familiar with the three characteristics that we develop, what we call vipassana meditation, seeing impermanence, the unsatisfactoriness, and the selfless nature of phenomena. The asupa perception is like the fourth characteristic you add on, seeing the unattractiveness of this body. So to do that, to counter the lust, the sort of inherent lust that we have, the attachment, desire for pleasure, the desire for procreation, and so on, that we bring with us from day one. It's another reflection in itself. Why was I born? Because I wanted to be born. I wanted a human body so I can carry on reproducing and experiencing the pleasure of the world. We're born because we want to be born. We're not born because of our parents. They gave us the opportunity to be born, but we're born because we have lust, craving, attachment accumulated from past lives. So we come into this body wanting to be born, wanting to have a body to use. That's why we fear death, that's why we fear pain, that's why we don't want to die, because we want to carry on using this body with lust, with sensual desire. It's what makes the world go round, as we know. So it's at the heart of our meditation practice, developing insight into this and developing the super perception, the perception of the unattractiveness of the body will help both to quieten the mind, quieten the hindrance of sensual desire, so that we can develop samadhi, but also to develop wisdom, insight into the true nature of phenomena. And one of the biases we have is sensual desire and lust. You're always looking for the objects of your lust, what makes you feel good, feel pleasure, experience pleasure. So it's an attachment to the body, attachment to the pleasant feeling, sukha vedana, and attachment to the objects that stimulate sukha vedana. So what stimulates us most is usually the opposite gender, opposite sex, unless you're homosexual, it doesn't really matter, the same principle. You see an attractive person, you like to look at them, hear them, smell them, touch them, taste them, and think about them, fantasize about them. There's nothing that fills the mind more than lust. It's strong, it comes up, it's satisfying while it's there, and it will block out all the other aspects of Dhamma. So you lose your mindfulness, you lose your insight, you can lose your sila, you can become immoral, you can become aggressive, you can become attached. All kinds of consequences come from getting lost in lust. So there's many aspects to look at. A supa is probably the most essential in the practice of meditation, but also just the general understanding of the suffering of lust and sexual desire, and looking at all the trouble it causes in the world. When people get lost in their sexual desire, they do all kinds of unskillful, harmful things to themselves, to others. You can see in the world a lot of the behavior of people in the world is based on sexual desire, often when they haven't even recognized it themselves, but often just the desire for power, money, fame, fortune is based around this. And often we feel it's quite normal. It's just seen as normal for human beings to act according to lust, sensual desire, to support it, to increase it, to make themselves powerful so they can have more of it and do more and reproduce more. It's our deepest instinct. But the Buddha and the Arahants have proven you don't have to be following lust and sensual desire all the time. You can abandon it. It doesn't have to be a conditioning factor in your mind if you work with it to let it go through developing sila, samadhi, panya, the Buddhist path. And that's the gift that the Buddha and the enlightened ones have given to the world. Otherwise we'd just be assuming lust, sexual desire is just normal for human beings and there's no other way. But they say, oh, it can be abandoned. It's possible, not necessarily easy, but it can be done through the practice. So Buddhist monks and nuns are celibate. You already keep to that precept or that training rule that we don't engage in any form of sexual behavior. So already on the level of morality and our external discipline and training, we've already abandoned it. But of course internally you'll still have it. Or if you're a layperson, you might undertake to keep 5 precepts. You may have a partner and you still engage in sexual activity, but you would undertake not to cheat on your partner or go outside your relationship, to be honest and to honour your relationship. But whether you're keeping 5 precepts or 8 precepts, where you're, even as a layperson, you might give up all sexual activity, become celibate maybe for a day or for a period of time on retreat, or whether you're a monastic, even though you take on external discipline to not engage in sexual activity, And that will reduce your lust and will is an essential part of dealing with sexual desire and abandoning it. We also need to develop the qualities on the inside to abandon it. So mindfulness, the perception of the unattractiveness of the body in one way or the other, develop states of samadhi, and then really investigate to see the unattractiveness of the body, the impermanence of the body. So we have, in Buddhism we have the 10 corpse meditations, developing the image of your own body as a corpse on various levels of degeneration. So the bloated corpse, the discoloration of the corpse which is full of maggots, the corpse which is sort of dried out and just skeleton with a bit of skin and hair left on it, or just the skeleton, or even just scattered bones, and so on. And this is one meditation we have to develop really to counter lust. And it's something you have to work at little by little. For most people, they can't just develop it quickly because lust is so ingrained and we're so used to it, and we're so partial to our pleasure. To just cut it off like that is impossible for most people unless they've already done it in the past and they're already well developed and find it a little easier to develop as a meditation object. Most people need to keep working at it through their life, developing images, nimitas, reflection, wise reflection on the physical body, observation of one's body, other people's bodies, and getting information. So when I was a monk in Thailand, right up to the time I left Thailand, we would regularly go to autopsies, which is something you can't necessarily do very easily in a country like Australia, but you can look up anatomy books, you can find various visual images and information to help you online. In our monastery we have a skeleton hanging up where the monks wash their bowls. That can help, studying the skeleton. Or if you are fortunate enough to be able to attend an autopsy, that's an excellent way to get the information to develop the perception of the unattractiveness or the loathsomeness of the body. Because in an autopsy, you've got a body there, male or female, they've died for whatever reason, and in a controlled circumstance with somebody explaining, they open up the center of the chest, and you can look at a human body on the inside, which is something you rarely get the chance to see, but most people find it very confronting, certainly at first. There's the visual image, the smell, and the fact that they're just confronting a dead body in close contact to it. Most people find that quite a challenge. Some people faint at the sight of blood or the dead body. Some people turn away. Some people can't cope with the smell. But if you establish mindfulness and use it as a learning experience, well, it can give you a lot of visual images and memories that you can then take away and use. Because what you're doing is balancing up your view of the body, you're focusing on the inside of the body, seeing it from the inside out. And later some of those images may return in your meditation when your mind is calm, peaceful in samadhi. This is quite normal for meditators, usually monks and nuns, but lay people as well will have these images. And sometimes you'll see your own body as a corpse when your mind is peaceful. Sometimes you'll see someone else as a corpse in various modes of decay. And maybe a particular part of the body will hold your attention, and you can develop it as a regular meditation to focus on, an organ of the body, or the skin, or the blood, or the skeleton, or one part of the skeleton, or the hair of the head, and so on. People do this, and they develop nimittas on different body parts, and that helps them to calm the mind down and also change the perception of the body. Because if you keep paying attention to the body, different parts of the body, or seeing the body in decay or as a corpse, that becomes something you're familiar with, and then when lust arises, you can turn to develop that meditation to counter lust. It both prevents lust arising and also helps you to deal with it when it does arise. And so, some meditators, they're quietly doing this contemplation at a time when maybe lust is being stimulated. Maybe they encounter someone they find attractive, but they don't want to just be a slave to lust for the rest of their life. So rather than flirting with a person or ogling them or going and having a relationship with a person, they turn away and start doing their Asupa meditation. And they're quietly doing this, maybe all by themselves, on the inside in their mind, and no one else knows. And meditators will do this because they're intent on abandoning both the hindrances and then the deeper attachments and identification with lust and the attachment to the body. I know monks who have practiced this, and when they start to get good at it, they can go into deep states of calm, states of jhana, contemplating the unattractiveness of the body. Can do it with food as well, contemplating the unattractiveness of food, the food that we eat, chewing the food, swallowing it, digesting it, excreting the waste. That whole process of eating is also a form of contemplation of the unattractiveness of the body. Or running through the 32 parts of the body as we chant, visualizing them, learning to really get to see them in your own body, and then noticing other people's bodies from the perception of Asupa rather than, so it's the opposite of saying, isn't he handsome, isn't she gorgeous? It's, hair gets greasy. We all have snot, we have earwax, we sweat. We all go to the toilet, we have a bowel full of excrement. We all urinate every day. Our bodies get older every day. So rather than going and looking for the attractive and getting caught up in that, obsessed with that, lusting after that, you're countering by focusing on the unattractive, which balances your perception up. The idea is just to get to the point where your mind is in the middle and you're neither obsessed with the attractive or the unattractive, but you just see a human body as it is. It's a mixture of attractive and unattractive parts. So for many people who are not Buddhists, never meditated, this will sound weird, crazy perhaps. But for anyone who has meditated, they'll probably already have noticed that they get obsessed with their body and the bodies of other people. It's quite normal. And they might want a way out. And the way out is to develop the perception of the unattractiveness of the body as a regular meditation. In Thailand, we didn't just go to autopsies, we also used to go and sit next to corpses in cremation grounds and charnel grounds and so on. Or at cremations, in some of the forest monasteries, they'll have open air cremation, and once the body of the dead person, once the coffin has burnt through, then you can actually see the human body burning. And maybe all the family and friends have gone home, but monks often will sit meditating next to a corpse that has been cremated all night, and you see the change from being a fully formed human figure in the coffin as it burns down, gets charred, and then you see the charred bones, and eventually you just got ashes. And you might watch that whole experience over a period of hours. Really teaching yourself that this body you carry around and the body of people you may desire end up like that. We all end up as just ashes or earth. That's the truth. And so it's gradually liberating your mind from the attachment based on wrong view of seeing the body as just a source of pleasure and happiness all the time. So it is actually a big part of the training in meditation and the Buddhist path towards enlightenment. It's often not talked about much because it's not that fashionable. It's a difficult subject for many people to approach. So approach it gently, and sometimes people approach it in the wrong way and end up being very angry or grumpy because you're really challenging some of your attachments when you're contemplating the perception of the body. So go gently, slowly perhaps, but over time it can be very rewarding when practiced over a number of months, years and so on. So remember the question, that greeting, have you seen your bones yet? That will give you an insight into what we're doing. So another question tonight. Luang Por, I have difficulty understanding in the 37 factors of enlightenment the 4 bases of spiritual power, the 5 spiritual faculties and the 5 spiritual powers. Out of compassion, can you explain the above? Well, the 4 Itipada, 4 bases of spiritual powers, they are part of this list of Dhammas, the 37 Bodhipakkhya Dhammas, we call the wings of awakening or the factors of awakening the enlightened mind. They're kind of like the complete list of all the qualities we develop in the practice for enlightenment. And the 4 bases of spiritual power or Itipada are Chanda, which means like the wholesome intention, the wholesome desire to practice. And basically you want to practice, you'd have to develop the desire, I want to practice, the willingness to practice, the interest, the clear and strong intention to practice the Dhamma, to train the mind in the path for enlightenment. And then the second one of them is virya, persistence, persistent effort, continually summing up fresh effort, putting it into the practice and not giving up. The third is citta, which means the mind and the development of focus, concentration, the concentrated mind, the development of the concentrated mind. And then vimamsa, which is investigation of the truth. All 4 of these qualities, it's basically chanda, virya, citta, vimamsa. Vimamsa is also panya, wisdom. They all are the basis for developing both samadhi and the development of Itipada also develops psychic powers. And there are many, when perfected, so the Arahant has perfected these 4 bases for power, or another way they translate it is rose to success. Or an Arahant, an enlightened being, is obviously successful because they've completed the path, abandoned their defilements, but they also gain all kinds of special powers with them. So these 4 powers, when developed, will give you the ability to extend your life. You can make a wish and extend your life, and that would only be for the good of others. You wouldn't need to yourself because you're already enlightened, but you might extend your life so you can teach and help others, free them from their suffering. And will have other great benefits, great results, great benefits. Might be able to cure disease and then develop psychic powers like reading people's minds so that you can understand where they're coming from and teach them know what teaching they need to hear in order to understand the Dhamma, and so on. So they lead on to all kinds of special knowledges, special power when perfected. But they're very good reflections for your daily practice. You've got to be willing to practice. You've got to have chanda, this intention to practice, because sometimes we don't want to practice. We get bored, we resist, we get fed up with it, we turn away. So it's very closely linked to the quality of saddha, or faith. But it means that willingness to engage with the practice, to put up with the difficulties, the obstacles. You're willing to practice, you want to do it. And that's a quality you need to keep bringing up and preserving. So it's a very positive quality. And virya, persistent, obviously, we have to keep summoning up effort in our practice. Citta is, training the mind, developing mindfulness, and then concentration, calm, states of stillness. And keep doing that so that we can pay attention to the practice, and this supports the development of wisdom, vimamsa, understanding how to deal with obstacles, understanding the nature of experience, investigating the qualities that we need to develop further in our practice, and so on. The other list you mentioned are also what we call part of the wings of awakening, the 37 factors you hear about in the suttas. So 5 spiritual faculties, 5 indriya, that's saddha, faith, virya, persistence, sati, mindfulness, samadhi, states of one-pointedness or unification of mind, and then panya, wisdom, insight. So many of these lists of different qualities you develop in the practice, they overlap. You'll find sati appearing in one or more of these lists. You'll see virya turning up all the time. You'll see virya, persistent effort. Panya, insight, wisdom. You'll see that turning up in these lists. So there's a lot of overlap, and the Buddha is just looking at, when he was talking about these qualities, he's looking at qualities from different angles, and also seeing their different relationship to other qualities, how they support each other, influence each other, and are factors that lead to the arising of other qualities, and how they relate to each other. So like with the 5 indriya, this is usually how the Buddha would describe a person, particularly an unenlightened person. What level have their 5 spiritual faculties developed to? How mature are they? So maybe they have faith but not much wisdom, or maybe wisdom but not much faith, or maybe they put forth effort but they haven't got much samadhi, or their mindfulness is lacking. It's a way of describing one's personal spiritual development towards nibbana. And so we say if somebody's spiritual faculties are weak, then they'll probably be experiencing more suffering and having more problems and issues in their practice, or maybe they'll turn away from the practice, or make a lot of bad karma, do a lot of unskillful things because their faculties are weak. Whereas somebody whose faculties were well developed and mature might be ripe to hear the Dhamma, and the Buddha would go and teach them, and maybe they become enlightened listening to his talk. So these 5 faculties can be well developed, weakly developed, and so on. Then the 5 spiritual powers are exactly the same list, and this is something that occurs all the time, this overlapping of lists of qualities. So again, it's faith, effort, mindfulness, stillness, and wisdom. Same list, 5 qualities, but when they're referred to as 5 spiritual powers, the word power indicates that you've developed them to a point where they're powerful enough to overcome the opposite. So what's the opposite of faith? Well, it's doubt and uncertainty, disbelief. So you've developed your faith because you've practiced to a point where you've seen some Dhamma and understood it, well, your faith is kind of become unshakable, unstoppable, established. And so the doubts and the wrong views that may pull you away from that can be, you have enough power in your faith to overcome the obstacles to it. And so virya is the same. Virya may be countered by laziness and dullness, but because you've developed it to a point, it becomes a power, so it can't be overcome anymore by dullness or laziness or apathy. Sati can't be overcome by confusion and lack of mindfulness. Samadhi can't be overcome by distraction. And wisdom can't be overcome by wrong views and suffering. So when these qualities become strong, unshakable, they become powers in your practice. So very similar to these 5 spiritual faculties, but just describing them from a different point of view. And particularly as powers, these 5 qualities become like powers, so they're unstoppable. So when the practice becomes unstoppable, which usually refers to an Arya Pugala, a noble one, who's already seen the Dhamma and abandoned a certain amount of mental defilement. Another question. Lumpur, why can I sit meditation and feel peaceful when I listen to you give a talk or a guided meditation, but become distracted if I'm sitting silently on my own? Ajahn Chah used to say, you've got to learn to give yourself your own Dhamma talk. You've got to learn the Dhamma and then teach yourself. If you're sitting there and your mind is distracted, sleepy, angry in one way or another, or overcome by lust, you've got to bring up the Dhamma and teach yourself. And that's your goal. So of course, Dhamma teachers give you the encouragement. We give you the information and the words of encouragement, and that can help in the beginning. And you listen, and that does help your mind to steady your mind, settle down, bring up mindfulness. Gives you confidence, gives you faith. All kinds of good qualities can come from listening to the Dhamma. But it's only the beginning. You've got to go off and practice for yourself, and you've got to get to the point where you can practice for yourself. That's your goal. So you've got to be able to teach yourself. So the Dhamma you've learned and practiced, you can bring it up and then give yourself that Dhamma talk rather than relying on an external source. Because Buddhism isn't, enlightenment isn't you have to be with the Buddha and have the Buddha enlighten you all the time. He gives you the information, you have to go off and practice. That's how it's done. You have to develop the qualities that the Buddha was pointing to and describing for yourself. We say the Dhamma is opanayiko, it's internally, it's pachatang, it has to be known by the wise for themselves. So Ajahn Chah was a great teacher, and people loved to sit and listen to him for many hours, and some people got addicted to it. So monks and lay people, sometimes he would chase them away and say, go away and do your own meditation, don't sit here. Because monks would just be sitting kind of adoringly listening to the Dhamma and probably getting something from it, but sometimes he saw they got too attached to him personally or to his words, so he'd shoo them away and say, go and do your own meditation. Because that's a sign of maturity in practice, isn't it? You want to get to the point where you can teach yourself, guide yourself, do it for yourself, and then from time to time you might get a top-up. You go and check that you're still practicing correctly, you listen to the teacher, and that's good, but you don't want to be addicted to the teacher, always dependent on hearing other people's words. You want to be able to sit silently and do it for yourself. That's one goal in the practice, isn't it? To be able to sit and walk meditation without earplugs, listening to a Dhamma talk. So it's not wrong listening to Dhamma, but you also have to learn how to set it aside. Another question. I'm always worrying about unfinished work and things I have to do when I meditate. What can I do about this? Stop. That's part of meditation, overcoming the 5 hindrances, and one of them is uttacha kukucha, restlessness, agitation of mind. And part of that is restlessness based on thinking about things you still have to do. Part of the restless mind is thinking about things you already did, maybe that you did wrong or badly, that you should have done better, or even that you did right and you're just going to keep dwelling on it. And then the other part is thinking about stuff you still got to do. So in its most subtlest form, you're never going to quite get beyond this worry and restlessness until you're enlightened, because even the anagami, the once returner, still has a little bit of restlessness, because they still got to look for the most subtle mental defilements still left in their mind and their consciousness. They've still got to look for them and find them, so that's a little bit of restlessness. But for, on the more normal level, like you say, you may have work you've got to do tomorrow. Say today we're at the end of Tuesday, the end of the day. So you're already probably thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? You've got plans, you've got things to do. That will come up. How are you going to treat that as you're meditating? Well, try to establish mindfulness on an object, your meditation object. Simplest method is just abandon all these other thoughts by telling yourself, I don't need to think about this stuff now. I'm just going to focus on the breath. Let everything else go. That's the simplest method. But if that's not working because the power and energy of all this restlessness, planning, wanting to do something, wanting to get something done, a feeling of worry about unfinished business or sense of responsibility, I've got to do this and help that person and get that done, you might need to use more effort. So sometimes you use wisdom as well. You reflect, oh, that's tomorrow. I haven't arrived. That tomorrow hasn't arrived yet. Just come back to the present moment. And you teach yourself to let go of these thoughts about stuff you still have to do. Ajahn used to say, just contemplate death. You might not reach tomorrow. Eventually you'll reach the last day of your life, whenever that will be, and all the stuff you haven't done yet will remain undone. So learn that lesson now. Don't wait till the last day of your life, whenever that's going to be. Do it today. Today is your last day of your life, so all that unfinished business, well, you can let it go now. Drop it. Doesn't mean to say you won't do it tomorrow. You may well pick it up and do it, but you don't need to think about it now in your meditation, because you're developing mindfulness on the breath or any other meditation you're doing, and you don't need to interrupt that and distract yourself by planning tomorrow's work and all that stuff. So keep letting it go, and eventually your mind will get the message and start dropping it, and then you'll feel very peaceful. If it doesn't get the message yet, contemplate death. Tomorrow may never come. Or Ajahn used to say, hold your breath. Once you're holding your breath, you stop thinking about tomorrow and all this other unfinished business, and you're just thinking, when am I going to breathe again? And it'll cut through it, and you get an idea of what it's like to let go. So you can use these little techniques to cut through endless proliferation about unfinished business, duties, responsibilities, worries. Enjoy the present moment, and once you're mindful in the present moment, it will become enjoyable, pleasant. It's actually pleasant to let go of concerns and plans and scheming about the future, the past, and you just dwell in the present moment. If only for a while, it'll be very pleasant for you. A good rest. Now, last question. How do I deal with regrets and guilt over the animals I have killed in the past? That's common for many people, isn't it? Well, if those animals are already dead, all you can do is mentally say sorry. That's the first thing, isn't it? You consciously become aware, oh, I've hurt somebody, if you're a murderer, or an animal, if you've killed an animal, big or small, and it comes to mind, you become conscious, aware, you have done this. The first thing would be to establish an awareness, that was an unwholesome act. You caused harm to another being, something that is unskillful and brings back negative karma to you. One of the negative kinds of karma is the regret, the memory, the unpleasant memory. Another may be actual harm that comes to you from what you've done in the past, in terms of, the Buddha said maybe illness, injury, shortened lifespan, that kind of thing. There are consequences, so you establish the clarity that there is such a thing as wholesome action, unwholesome action. Unwholesome action, such as killing and harming other beings, is to be abandoned. As far as the ones you've done already, mentally you acknowledge you did something unwholesome, you hurt, you harmed, you took away a life, you mentally ask forgiveness. Just as a way of acknowledging that being that's died, you're asking forgiveness, making amends. Well, you can't see that person being anymore because they've gone. Maybe what you can do is undertake from now on, I'm not going to hurt or harm anyone else. So you take on the first precept and you change your karma instantly in your life. You change direction of your life. I mean, you may have already done this, but now you can do it, and you redo it every day, don't you? You re-establish that commitment not to harm and become more and more skilled at it. You become mindful and aware of your actions, so you consciously abandon the intention to kill or harm. So you've learned from your mistake or your unskillful behavior. Now you've set your mind on a new course. So this is new good karma, which will bring its new good results. A sense of feeling at ease in yourself, development of kindness, compassion towards other beings, a lack of regret. Because once you're keeping the first precept, you're not killing, you no longer are creating the cause to regret that kind of action. And people often do further things to teach themselves, so they go and buy some living creatures that are destined to be killed and then save their lives. So they go and buy fish that's destined for the cook pot and then release them back into the sea or the river. They buy crabs, or they buy this, or they buy that, or they even rescue cows and buffaloes from slaughterhouses. Whatever you can do. Or if that's not possible, you practice metta to teach yourself. So you maybe go and feed some animals, train yourself in kindness and compassion to counter the previous tendency of aggression or harming others. And then, you give up those kinds of actions that lead you to kill. So if you used to hunt, you give up hunting. If you used to fish, you give up fishing. If you used to kick the cat, you stop kicking the cat, because cats don't need to be kicked. If you hit your dog, you stop hitting your dog. If you hit people, stop hitting people. You learn to change your behavior, and that's the best way to get to learn from the experience and then get beyond it. And the remorse, well, it is sad when you remember people or animals you've hurt, but you have to accept what's done is done. It's a past action. Now you can drop it because you've acknowledged it. You drop it, you let it go, and you move on in a more skillful way. And all of us have learnt that lesson in one way or another, I imagine. Sometimes when you're kids, it's just little things like flies and wasps and mosquitoes. Some people it's bigger things, like rabbits and fish. Some people have been in a few fights and hurt somebody, or that's something you learn from as well. But we can learn as human beings, and we can move on. And this we call evolution, spiritual evolution. towards complete harmlessness, and then the freedom of remorse and the peace of mind that comes with it. So, that was the last question tonight. Hopefully something has been of use tonight and stimulate you in your Dhamma practice. We'll leave it there till next time.